Hello, welcome. Today, I am particularly excited to welcome Dr. Warren Bradley, who is the founder of Hytro, to the podcast. Warren, how are you doing?
Andy, I'm great, mate. Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
Yeah, we've been working on this for a long time, several years it feels like. But one of the
Yeah.
main barriers has been that you're all over the place. So in general, how are you? How's your well-being?
Oh, it's a really good question, and thanks for asking. Good, really good. Perpetually jet lagged, I would say, but super exciting with where things are at the moment and where it's heading. So yeah, always excited, but a little bit tired as well.
Well, I think I see a lot of synergy in terms of how I feel as to the work that you're doing with that. You're always doing amazingly exciting stuff. So, for those of people who haven't seen it, you're in the States. It feels like half of your time is in the US. You're doing things over in the UK. So, just give me like what have you done in what are the key things would you say that you've done in June?
In June, gosh, I need to look back through the diary. There's been so much, but cliff notes, I guess. I think our second space mission was just before the start of June, but that was exciting. I've been to Dallas, been to Boston with Whoop, so spent a week with Whoop doing research, signed a heap more teams. Yeah, just kind of gaining traction in the US market for the business, I guess. And personally, I've actually found out I'm going to be a father in December as well. So on a personal,
Wow.
very, very exciting, mate. And I need to probably look at the flight schedules and yeah, have a hard conversation with the Hytro team and be home a little bit more, I guess, to help the missus and yeah, that's it in a nutshell, I guess, buddy.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And again, I think what I see it with you is, and it's so exciting. I feel the same with the work that we're doing, but I also know it's exhausting and it's
Yeah.
like you're on all the time and it's exciting. So you want to do more, but then you need to rest. So how do you manage that, particularly added in with the jet lag? Some of those places are that I know that is a killer. Coming back from the US to the UK is an absolute killer. So how do you manage it?
I guess you've also highlighted an important point. It's something I really am passionate about. So I don't, it's not a job to me at all. I'm just always like this. This is really fun. I get to speak to a friend and just shoot the ship. Sorry, am I allowed to
You
swear on
can
this?
swear, it's
We
fine.
can
Yeah.
cut. Okay. But in terms of kind of management strategies, I guess because of my background as sports science and traveling a lot with the sevens, England Rugby sevens, I worked out for several years. It I've kind of learned coping strategies already throughout my career, so I kind of fell into this quite naturally. So, I'd be doing my blood flow restriction on the flights due to the product that we've created, but I'd also have my nutrition packs. I'd know when to consume what. I'd, walk 10,000 steps before the first flight because I knew I'd be traveling for 24 hours, for example. When I get there, I ensure, my sleep wake cycles are looked after, and just generally staying active and moving is it's really important for me mentally. So as soon as I land and lift is kind of a motto that I go by. Whether that's BFR in the bed in the hotel room or whether it's jumping in the hotel gym, either or, I'll just get some movement in. But it really works. It really does, and I can see it in my HRV when I do and I don't do it. So it's quite objective actually that the things I'm doing are working.
Right, that's interesting. So you were doing this stuff prior to Hytro anyway, because I liked your post the other day where I'm the same. When if I'm on a phone call, I'm walking around getting my steps in the office, and we've got a
Yeah.
nice loop that we do. And you did almost 10K, I think, in the airport prior to going away. So if
Yeah.
you were doing, how long have you been doing that for?
Well, I guess my career started back in 2011 in professional sports, and it was a little bit different, but I was a sports scientist consultant in professional sports. So I worked with, England Rugby for 6 years, Munster Rugby, Leicester Tigers, Hull City Football Club in the Premier League. So what ended up happening was I drove a lot. So living in Liverpool, I was all over the country because I'd have two or three consultancies simultaneously. So while it wasn't jet lag per se, it was still fatigue from kind of travel. So I'd be doing 20 hours a week in the car. It was actually pretty brutal, to be perfectly honest with you, but I loved the jobs. So I had to come up with coping strategies for it then because I knew I was going to burn out. So I always set off an hour earlier to lift in the gym and get my social cup filled with the staff, the ones that would be there at 6:30 in the morning. We'd jump in the gym, we'd do a lift, we'd have a chat, have a catch up, and it set me up for the day. And I'd then go to bed a bit earlier that night. But front ending ticking the boxes front end really helped that day go smoothly. And if I missed that gym session in the morning because I was really tired getting up, I knew it was a worse day than typical. So very early on in my career, I was learning coping strategies for things like that. So I've actually taken it in my stride. I feel, touch wood, continue to moving forward. Now, when there's a child on the scene, it's my first. So I mean, sleepless nights might put a big spanner in that works. I'll find out soon enough. But work so far.
Let's see if Hytro can help with that, because you might have a much bigger market than you've already got.
Yeah, sure. Who knows if we can offset jet lag and sleep deprivation? Who knows? Load it with some creatine, 20 grams of creatine for sleep deprivation. Get the BFR on. Who knows? Let's do some research.
Yeah. And then, so just like you talked about when you started in 2011, like how did you
Yeah.
end up in Liverpool? How did you end up doing sports science?
So I went to university in Liverpool in 2008, just as typical undergrad, masters, onto PhD. Into my PhD was exercise physiology and nutrition. And I believe I was the first person in the UK to be full-time embedded PhD in a professional rugby team, and that was at Munster Rugby. So that was 2012. I started my PhD, and essentially what happened over the subsequent years was a lot of kind of cross-pollination between practitioner and academic work, because I was doing research while working full-time in the club setting. And because I was kind of seeing things like blood flow restriction done or other methodologies, I was really curious. I wasn't just sat back saying, that's cool, and left it there. I was like, that's cool. Let's look into it. Let's look at the literature behind it. And I started to kind of understand that blood flow restriction itself was extremely well researched, right? There was over 10,000 research papers many years ago. So I just said, let's pull on that thread a little bit further. Why are we not using it outside of rehab, things like recovery of athletes and whatnot? And the answer is the tools were too complex and too cumbersome to scale. So I've patented, or we at Hytro, sorry, have patented the integration of blood flow restriction technology into wearables, which basically democratizes BFR. It allows anyone to do it. But that only happened because of the intersect between practitioner and academic and having that intellectual curiosity, which has kind of served me really well with the business because I'm always pushing boundaries. I'm always hypothesizing, rightly or wrongly, with the hypothesis, I'll test it. So if you as a team use something in a certain way and come to me and say, this is really interesting, we tried it in an ice bath, for example, we'll go and do the research because we're prepared to do that. So it's kind of set me up with this skill set and toolbox to know how to run research, have the curiosity to run the research, and actually be able to unpack the science, hypothesize, and ask the right questions. I think that was a bit off piece there, but hopefully.
No.
Interesting.
I think it's really interesting the way that it comes in. So when you were going on to that, so when you started your undergrad, was always the plan? Was it always the plan to do the PhD?
Oh no, not at all actually. So I wanted to be a physiotherapist actually. So after my year three, I was asking kind of the senior lecturers or the professors that I was closest with, how do I get into this career path from sports science? Because I didn't do a physiotherapy specific physio degree. And they said, well, you'll need exposure. You'll need to, shadow someone for a while, 6 months, a year, and do the course. This was back then. I can't speak to if that's the truth or not. And I was trying to get placements, but they wouldn't have me because I wasn't a physio student. But I couldn't get onto physio without the shadowing experience. I was in this between a rock and a hard place thinking I want to pursue this career, but I can't. I'm literally, there's a barrier in front of me. And then Professor Graham Close came to me and said, you play rugby, right? I was like, yeah, play rugby. You good on the nutrition module? Do you like it? I was like, yeah, it's interesting. I do like it. I was probably scoring pretty highly comparatively to my other modules as well. And he said, cool. Do you want an opportunity to do a PhD? But you'll have to move country. You'll have to move next week. And it'll be in a professional, massive European professional rugby union team, Munster Rugby, right? It's a big, big team. And I was a bit shell shocked because I was actually an undergrad. So it was a third year undergrad, and there was master students that could have definitely done the job, but Graham had obviously seen something in me and given me that opportunity. And yeah, I mean, a 2 foot dive straight in, just dumped into the deep end, moved over. I think it was literally 10 days later, and was in the role like another few days later after that. No summer holidays that year. So I was straight from undergrad into kind of the workforce. There was no gap in between, and ever since I've not really had a huge holiday, to be honest. But that was really the start of kind of sharpening my tools and understanding what I wanted to become in the future. So entrepreneurship was never really something I was considering at the beginning, but I clearly had I guess, the acumen and the skill sets to do it because I was always drawing from different pillars and combining and cross-pollinating and conceiving and conceptualizing. So I was really into that, but I never thought about what that meant. I just thought this is fun to think about. And I've got diagnosed ADHD. I've had it since all my life, but diagnosed at 4. So I've always had multiple tracks of thoughts going on simultaneously. And it's a blessing and a curse. A curse because I can't sleep very well because the brain doesn't stop, but a blessing because I'm able to really critique things and obsess over things and do it in multiple tracks at the same time. And all of this together laddered up to, I guess, conceiving of the business that I now run with my co-founders, Raj and Paul, which is Hytro. But without that work of, like the iceberg analogy, all that work underneath the water that you don't see, like the iceberg didn't happen, Hytro didn't come to the fore. So it takes decades of experiences to amalgam to lead up to this kind of thing, right? It doesn't just happen overnight.
Yeah, no, definitely. So how long were you in Munster for then? How long were you in Ireland?
That was just over 2 years. And I will say it was one of my favorite ever jobs. It was unbelievable. Living in Cork, very family kind of vibe oriented. Rugby teams are very it's a very kind of brotherhood type vibe. You'd be going out on the lash with some of the players, where it's a little bit different in football. You wouldn't necessarily be doing that. So yeah, mate, I loved it. I loved Munster. Incredible job.
Where did you live?
I lived in Cork. So they had split sites at the time. They had a site at CIT, which is the Institute of Technology, which is in Cork, and they had Limerick, so it was University of Limerick, UL. And then twice a week we met up at either or. So half the squad was in each site, and we'd meet on a Tuesday and a Thursday in either or, and then the rest of it was training separately, and then we met for the games. So I was based in Cork at that point in time.
Where were you actually living? Like, was it accommodation?
Oh, sorry. Various. I lived just rentals, renting house. I wasn't in a student kind of setup at that point. I was at different places, to be honest, scattered around Cork City. Do you know Cork?
I've been to Cork a few times. I love going to Cork. I've kissed the Blarney Stone officially, so I've done all the touristy stuff. Like I was actually, we went to an event. This was years ago, and Roy Keane was in the hotel lobby, and I'm really annoyed at myself that I didn't go over and speak to him. But
I'm surprised you didn't.
I know it's very unlike me actually. I think I was a guest of someone else, and I just thought they were Irish, and just thought they're gonna think he's just This was before. I'm probably a bit more happy to do the selfies now, but no, I still was then, to be fair. But yeah, that is a little bit of a regret for me. Anyway, it's not about me. So yeah, but that's sort of a big shift, isn't it? All of a sudden, you're going over to Ireland, because Ireland is a very different place. I know Liverpool and I'll have similarities. Essentially, you're a flight away from home.
Yeah. Very different, very similar in the same breath. Very laid back, and it took me a while to get used to that kind of roadworks. Would be there for 3 years and you wouldn't see anyone working on them. It's the old analogy, right? It was quite true. But with that laid back nature just came, incredibly humble, friendly, lovely people. And it's my heart is also in Ireland. My missus, my partner, is from Ireland, so I met her in Cork actually 12 years ago. She moved back over to England with me. Not sure how I managed to drag her over, but yeah, so I'm very much tied to Cork. We've got a lot of family there, of course, through my partner Claudia. So we're always back over. Yeah, it holds a special place in my heart for sure, does Ireland and Cork in particular.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I can imagine you're going to learn so much by being thrown into working in particularly a rugby environment where, like you say, it's quite a unique experience, and you will be literally thrown in on dealing with everything. So, like, how did you cope with that initially with that baptism of fire?
Do you know what? It was really challenging for the first 2 to 3 months, to be honest, because it was a brand new landscape for me, and I was working ridiculous hours. I wouldn't care to put a number on it, but I was in every single day for like 8 weeks. I was on the weekends because I didn't have any friends at this point. I didn't know anyone. I had nothing else to do. I had keys to the facility, because I had this big nutrition room, and it had, hundreds of thousands of euros of protein powders, creatines, all the bottles, everything was in here. And I had to, I guess I was proving myself, right? And I was working above and beyond because it's my first ever big role and it's such a big club. And with that came some weight, really. So I'd be in on a Saturday for 6 hours in the morning. I'd have a lift, get prepared for the day, and then I'd be filling protein shakers for literally 5 hours, because what I'd do is I do a pre-training protein shake, but with that I had like creatine, beta alanine. Gosh, what else did we put in? All sorts of things that was coming out in the literature. There was like 5 compounds in this protein shake, but then some people didn't have it. There was a squad of 55, so I had to number every single protein shake, make sure every single one was correct, and then I had to do it for post training, where some people had have different products, and then I had the pill pots, and everyone had different pill pots prescribed, because I'd have some people on like CLAs to help metabolize lipids because they were a bit over, carrying body fat, other people on extra creatine, just different things. So it took me hours to get this sorted. That's all done. And then it'd probably be, tea time, have my dinner, go watch some Netflix. It wasn't Netflix then, actually. Actually, I didn't even have internet at this point. It took ages to get that set up. So I think I was just writing up some of my PhD, to be honest, at that point in time. But anyway, long story short, the first 2 to 3 months were just solid work, but it really set me up for the year coming, because, I had my routines. I then met people, took the foot off the gas a little bit, enjoyed myself as well. And it was fun thereafter.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. But like, when you were doing all that, it's a lot of responsibility. So who were you
Mhm.
working with to doing that? Was it just your initiative, or did they have a team that you were kind of underneath?
A bit of both, really. So my supervisor, Professor Graham Close, but he was obviously based back in Liverpool. He'd be on the end of a call if I needed him, and he would come out for 2 days a month, to kind of oversee. And to be honest, if he listens to this, it'd be funny, but he was sometimes a bit of a hindrance because he's such a chatty guy and he's so intelligent. He just chats shit to people all day, and I'm like, Graham, we got a job to do here, and I'd be keeping him on track and on schedule. And to be honest, it got to the point where I was like, oh, Graham's coming tomorrow. I can't wait to see him, but I know it's going to be a mental 2 days of me trying to catch up after. So he oversaw it, but actually it just ended up me kind of guiding Graham over here. And then there was some incredible people involved, like Bryce Kavanagh, who obviously went on to incredible things after that. He was England football's head of performance and medicine for 7 years. Now he's at Chelsea in a really big role. He was mentoring me at the time. He's got a special shout out in my PhD thesis, actually. Like, I loved working with Bryce. Aled Walters, who was a strength and conditioning coach at the time, who's now head of performance. He's gone on the Lions tour. He's won multiple World Cups with South Africa, and he's now, incredibly accomplished. They've all done really good stuff. So I had a really good team that I was working with, but it was a strange position because I wasn't really working under anyone per se. Bryce was my boss and line manager, but nutrition was its own department, which was N equals two, which was Graham and me, but Graham wasn't there. So I had complete autonomy. And I guess because I was, in inverted commas, and this sounds crazy to say because I was so young, the expert in the room in nutrition, definitely wasn't an expert, but I was the most well-read, let's say. I kind of had the autonomy to say, right, we're going to do this amount of grams of creatine for this individual because I've done his diets and his skin fold measurements, and this is what he requires. So really autonomous, actually, which was useful skill to pick up.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, isn't it? It's a massive responsibility. It's a big club and doing that. But I'm certainly a believer in that you do raise yourself to the level of the expectation and the responsibility that you're given, and as long as you've got that support around you. So, what happened after the 2 years?
So Bryce moved back to Australia to go work at Sydney Swans as head of performance. So he invited me to come and take up a position over there. So I thought, why not? I've done 2 years in Munster. A third would be amazing, but does it add to the CV at this point versus going abroad? So I thought, you know what? I'll take the opportunity. The second I set foot in Australia, I got a phone call from Graham offering me the job at England Rugby Sevens, and I was like, that's a pretty good opportunity. And I was head of nutrition for England Rugby Sevens in this role, as opposed to finding my feet in Australia. So I ended up going to Australia, taking it as a bit of I think 8 weeks, I took off and did a bit of sightseeing and looking around the East Coast. Went to visit Bryce and see the facilities and whatnot. Told him the news. He was obviously, made up for me. He was happy. Came back and went to work for England Rugby. Completed my PhD there under stewardship from Dan Howells, who I know you know very well. Incredible guy. Also involved in Hytro now, which is cool. And actually, I will say, Dan was one of the first people to properly introduce me to blood flow restriction with the team at England Sevens. Really got me kind of excited by it. And that's when I started thinking about BFR a bit more, putting a bit more weight on it than I should have, considering what my role was, because I was not in a role to deliver BFR, but I was really kind of bowled over by the evidence and research behind it. So that started the catalyst of me coming up with Hytro.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so to talk then, how did that happen? Like, what was that step when you thought actually this could be something?
It was So I was still working at England, but I was in Hull City and Derby County at the time as well. So I had three consultancies, and everyone was doing BFR, right? Everyone does it for rehabs. So obviously, there's always some rehabbing athletes, and I was seeing it being done in different ways with different devices, but they were all big wired boxes, clunky, very effective, with digital readouts and whatnot. So again, very effective, but required that supervision element. And I was just thinking, well, everyone's doing it, so it's commonplace. There's all of this evidence. And even in the evidence at the time, there was new stuff coming out like recovery with BFR. I was like, well, why wouldn't we do recovery with a healthy athlete? Let's pop these cuffs on a healthy athlete and help them recover better. But then I was like, this is too complex. Like, if we want to do this with a full squad of Premier League footballers, we can't. We simply can't. We can't do it. Even if we had 20 of the pneumatic devices, you still need to supervise them to do it. So it's still impractical. And that's really where it started. And I'll be, excuse me, completely honest about the main catalyst. It was the drive. So two things on that. During the drive, I kind of nearly fell asleep a few times and I got really frightened on a couple of occasions. Like, I'm actually going to lose my life here doing this job. So I need to find a way to not be traveling so far. I don't want to work full time for any one club because the pay for nutrition was capped. And what I was earning as a consultant in three teams was far beyond what I would earn. So I was like, I can't take a 40 grand pay cut to do this, but I don't want to die either. So let's obsess ways to get out of this situation and do what I love still. And what I did was I used that time wisely. So I turned off the podcast, turned off the radio, no music, 5 a.m. or 4:30 till 7:30 in the car every day that I was traveling was just thinking time. And as I said, I've got ADHD, so I was kind of like really quickly cycling through ideas and obsessing them and ringing insurance companies later in the day after I'd come up with an idea to validate it to see if it was, a good opportunity. And it was anything from like coffee bars to, I remember thinking about an airsoft shooting range where you had a bar next to it, like axe throwing or bowling alleys where you can go and do an activity but drink. I was thinking about stuff like that, like what insurance do you need to shoot a metal pellet while you're drinking next door and like go through revolving doors and all this kind of crazy stuff.
So not BFR related then.
Well, no, so it came onto that. Then I was like, they're all cool, but really my passion is sports science and exercise physiology. It's what my PhD is in. So I was just then thinking about BFR, thinking, well, yeah, it's really cool. Loads of evidence, loads of research. We can't do it currently on a scalable way. What components need to be satisfied for that to be okay to do? And it was two safety parameters that we needed to solve. One was the location of the BFR. So normally you have to supervise putting a cuff on someone to make sure it's proximal. You could ask them to do it and watch them, of course. But if you give them it to take home, they could put it on mid bicep, mid thigh, etc., and that's quite dangerous. So how do you make it so that it's always in the right location? Build it into a garment, right? That was my initial thing. Like, if we build this into t-shirts and shorts, it's always in the right place. It's in the armpit or the groin. Now, bear in mind, this was just a concept at the time. It wasn't Hytro. It was just an idea. And then I was thinking, well, what's the other safety parameter? It's that it doesn't occlude the artery. So how do you stop a tourniquet from occluding an artery? We need to guardrail it. You need to safety guardrail it and make it so that the pressure cannot occlude an artery in any individual. And that was a concept without an answer at that point because I couldn't do pressure validation on something that didn't exist. So it was more that I knew that had to be satisfied for this to be scalable and safe. And we did subsequently, of course, do that. But those were the ideas. And then I thought, okay, it's a good idea. Let's look online. Let's look at patents. Let's see what exists. Nothing. There was literally loads of BFR stuff, but nothing like this. I was like, surely someone's done it. It makes so much sense that this would be an easier way to do it. And I was knocking my head against the wall thinking, no one has done this. This is crazy. And then I thought, well, I don't know how to build a business. I'm an academic practitioner. I have no business degree. I don't know how to build a business at this point in time. So I know I'll get the patent. I'll take all of my savings, every penny I owned, and apply for the patent. And that's what I did. So my brother actually helped me. He took me to a patent office in Leeds, came in with me, kind of figuratively speaking, held my hand. He's an older brother, 8 years older, so he's a bit more savvy, and took me in to make sure I wasn't being taken for a ride, I guess. We paid for the kind of work to be done. Patent was then pending. And then I went to work for a company in London called Goldmaster. And that was run by a guy called Raj, and the owner was Paul. Raj was the CEO. And after a few months of working with them, I was providing nutrition expertise. It was like a high-end fitness, blood work, strength and conditioning, nutrition service for high net worths, essentially. So a very expensive service. So they needed the best coaches to coach their clients. And then after a few months of working with them, I was like, these guys are really switched on. They're clearly connected. They're in the sports space now, although having business backgrounds and banking and legal backgrounds, they're clearly, highly proficient in running some kind of sports-ish business. I'm going to pitch them. And I just said, I've got this idea. I've got a patent pending. I've got this network. I know these people in the Premier League. So we have a market immediately. What do you think? And they poker face, went away, spoke about it, and I'm told later that they obviously thought it was a really good idea straight away. But they were like, yeah, we'll give you a hand. After 2 weeks, give me a hand, it just turned into a business together. They were like, we want in. So we had a few kind of meetings in London. And then really just it started escalating over that next year. I still kept my jobs in sports as we built the foundations. And then when we got the signal that, this is really viable as a business, they stopped Goldmaster. They didn't fold. Sorry, they stopped operating Goldmaster, and I stopped working in professional sports. And then we went whole hog. If I may just make one point on the car journey, because I think it's really important for people to understand, is that it's not often you get time to sit with your thoughts in this society now with phones and any spare minute you're kind of looking down at a screen. It was really a really unique opportunity to have so much time that was forced upon me where I couldn't look at a phone because I was in a car. I couldn't look down. I had to look straight forward and drive, right? And it was 20 hours a week. You can't buy that type of time to think. So it was a really unique and fortuitous circumstance where I just put my mind to work. And I'd encourage anyone to put some time aside when they can to do that type of work because it changed my whole life just because of that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So did you have music on when you were doing it, or
No, absolute dead silence. Just really got into my kind of just zone.
that's impressive. That you described me perfectly. That like, if I'm doing the clothes, which I love putting clothes on the like you're drying clothes for whatever reason, I really love that. But I can't do it unless I'm watching a podcast or something. It's really it's difficult, and I think a lot of people find that you're so trained to just be doing something.
Yeah.
So was it hard to do that? Or like how did you have to think about it, or with the way that you work, it comes naturally?
It was a little bit difficult in terms of my mind was going a lot of different places. It was always meditative, like training the brain to try and focus. But because it was forced upon me, like I couldn't pick up or walk around or go do something else. I had to drive and I had to face forwards doing so. So I just made a conscious decision to say that radio is not going on. I'm not going to listen to podcasts. All I was left with was thinking time. So by forcing myself into a position, yes, it was difficult, but the more I got excited about an idea as well, the deeper I could go. And that's kind of what happened. I just got really excited and okay, what's the next steps? Who do I need to speak to find out the information to tick that bit off the list? And it was just sequential. It just kind of naturally flowed, built a business plan in my head, essentially. well, a very uninformed and not a great business plan, but an idea of what I was going to do anyway, perhaps not business, but what's next. And then I just actioned them after work. I'd make the phone calls in the car on the way home, for example, or over the weekends. That's when I'd like ring insurance companies and see if this was a viable opportunity, or ring patent offices and set up meetings. So, yeah, it was hard, but I was lucky because I was forced into it. I couldn't just get up and walk around and play on my phone.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that time I love being in the car. And most of the time I do have a podcast or music or audiobook or something. But I do think it's a great time because you're focused on what you're doing, and it's so easy to be doing multiple things, which really isn't healthy. And so for you then, so you got the three of you, Raj and Paul, as well then. So at that point, like, what was the goal?
Do you know what? Transparently, we really thought the business would take off a lot quicker than it has, because we weren't obviously experts in startups, and we thought it would happen in the gym, the consumer gym space, because blood flow restriction, as you're well aware, grows muscle quickly. That's one of its primary kind of outcomes, and it does it without heavy loads. And because we built it into t-shirts that looked really cool, because we built them to look cool and built them with like top end designers, Gucci, Balenciaga, that's the factory that we work with. They make their clothing. So really cool gear. Like, of course, everyone's going to pay whatever the price was at the time for a t-shirt that grows your muscles. Why wouldn't they? Not considering the fact that someone who pays 19.99 to go to JD Gym is not paying 200 quid for a t-shirt, right? It's not a t-shirt, of course, it's a performance tool, but there was no education in the market to inform them that it, was such a thing. They didn't know what BFR was. And if they had seen it, it was probably just straps and tourniquets that they're wrapping around the legs and arms, which cost a tenner. So we really actually struggled the first year, because that's how we pitched it and positioned it, until we realized that people in pro sports, like my community and people I knew, were really interested in the product, but not the t-shirt, the shorts. And we didn't have any shorts. So we were like, there's some strong signal here from an industry that already uses this type of technique, that they would love a lower body version of this. Let's build it and test it. So we built the shorts, which took another 8 months to get the designs correct, because with our product, it contours the body properly so that BFR is delivered very, very efficiently and standardizes the pressure. Not like a cuff where the bladders can change in terms of pressure. It can be positioned a little bit wrong. We built it so that it's really effective for delivering BFR safely and effectively and comfortably. So once we built it and we launched it to the market, it just exploded. Like, everyone was like, that is brilliant. You've solved the problem for us. We used to have to wheel out this machine into the gym, like a hospital kind of drip. And again, really effective, but just cumbersome and complex. And like, an athlete would often look at it and say, oh, not this again, type job. But when it's kind of a cool pair of shorts that's a bit more aesthetic, that's got more freedom and flexibility, like, you can strap in and strap out yourself whenever you want, as opposed to fiddling with digital apps and gauges. It just made it way more accessible and way more easy to implement. So when we launched it, it just blew up. And now, gosh, we're in over 300 teams around the world, the best teams in the world as well, top NFL, Premier League, LeBron's used the product, Ronaldo's used the product. We've had the best athletes in the world love the product. So we've got the signal now. And to think we started in the gyms thinking the gym bro would want to grow their big muscles with this, and now we're more of a recovery delivery system for the best athletes on the planet. It's quite a disconnect between the two things, right? But it
Yeah.
was a journey to get there. It was a journey to get there.
No, it's fascinating. I remember when I just started PhysiQuip, and I remember Ian Horsley messaged me and he's like, "Look, blood flow restriction. We really want to get something in it, EIS as it was at the time." And he put me in touch with that. I think they were struggling to get hold of things. This must have been 2012, I guess. And it was a place in Japan. Was it Katsu? You probably know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like there wasn't that much then. It seemed like there wasn't that much of an infrastructure, and we looked at getting involved at one point. We just didn't, and then all of a sudden, you did start seeing some of these ones. A few brands seem to come into the market and start offering it, which is probably the time when you were thinking it was a good idea to build into this. Well, like, seeing what you've done now, it does look incredible. Like, all the teams that you're working with, you're traveling, you're doing all of this amazing stuff. NASA, like it's amazing. Like how do these opportunities, like how, you've kind of just kind of glossed over it a little bit there in that you've gone from struggling in year one to now you're doing this. So how do you start building that momentum, and like how quick was it?
It's all about community, right, and relationships. So thankfully, we had a head start because of my community in sports. So I'd know someone in every Premier League team or most championship teams. So I could immediately go to them, whether it was the decision maker or not, I knew someone. So we could go to them, learn insights, change the product if we needed, get them on side, and then sell products essentially. And then ask that person, what's your network? Can you help us enter the cricket market or the rugby market? Rugby was, of course, fine because I was already in rugby, but who do you know in America? Let's start tapping into that network. And it's just been a long game of building strong, powerful relationships. So even, of course, it was CSCCA 3 years ago in America, the Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Association conference. And I was on a booth, on the Hytro booth opposite another booth, and there was a guy called Brian Buck on this booth. And at these conferences, typically vendors don't necessarily speak very much. I know you do because you're the type of character that would, and I do. So guess what? I went over and spoke to him, shook hands, explained who I was, asked him loads of questions. And it turns out, he's training Myles Garrett, one of the best NFL athletes on the planet. He's training LeBron with Mike Mancias. He's, an incredible guy. I'd have never known had I not spoke to him. And he loved what we were doing. So off the back of that, we built a relationship. He now works with Hytro. He now helps us open up opportunities in the US through his incredible network across all the major leagues and major athletes. He's also then introduced us to someone he worked with in his company called Chase. He's now our head of US sales because another incredible guy who, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying, I won't mention the name, but he works with the most famous skateboarder on the planet. Essentially, he's a performance coach to him. And yeah, so like it's just network to network to network and just forging those relationships that open that spider web up. And it just happens every day. Mate, it happens every single day. I'm speaking to at a new conference, I'm speaking to a new team. Like, I guess, who was it? Was it Nebraska Huskers first? So a big collegiate D1 American football team. Made very good friends of their director of sports science called Mitch Cholowinski. And because he liked us and our products so much, straight on the phone to Atlanta Falcons. And lo and behold, Atlanta Falcons get involved and buy a ton of product. Now people from Atlanta Falcons are investing in the business, right? So we just had an investment from one of their performance directors the other day, like 3 days ago. So it's just connection after connection after connection because we are very much about relationships, but it does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. That one lead turns to 3, turns to 10, turns to 100, and it has to grow like that. But we're now at that exponential curve point where we've really broken through and built enough relationships to open enough doors to service all of the industry, essentially in professional sports.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And then, so how does that piece with NASA, how did that come about? Like, how do you find out that they're interested?
That was a crazy one. So really a pinch me moment for all of us in the business. The cliff notes are phone call from a guy called Cody Burkhart, who is the chief engineer for human works at NASA. So real big deal at NASA. He said, we've solved a problem for astronaut health in space. I was like, okay. I wasn't entirely sure what he meant. And he explained, we've been looking at BFR for decades, but we could never use a device because none of them were deemed safe for spaceflight. Because if you have a digital device, it could spark and it could cause a combustible chamber in a vacuum. Everyone's dead. If you use a tourniquet, there's no knowing what pressure is applied. There's no standardization. There's no numerical value ascribed. They can't deliver that safely in space. And obviously what we've done is we've married the two. We've removed all of the complexity, but built the science in and validated it from a tourniquet system so that it is validated, safe and effective. We know the pressures within a range, but there's no digital. So he was like, you've solved the problem. And from first conversation to being in space for the first time was 6 months. Absolutely unprecedented. I'm not sure if it's ever happened. Maybe it has, but it's unprecedented that a business like us or any business goes to space from a first conversation in 6 months. And the reason that happened is because we had such a big solve for such a big problem. Muscle atrophy in space is a serious issue. Bone mineral density losses are a serious issue, particularly for the future of mankind if we're looking to go off planet, because we're going to be in space, we're not. People are going to be in space for long periods of time to get to Mars. So you need ways to offset and mitigate muscle atrophy and bone mineral density losses, which we have solved for. So they were really excited. So they rolled out the red carpet, invited us to the Johnson Space Center. So we've all bowled over. Only Americans are allowed in. So we've had to not say anything so they couldn't hear English accents, get these pink passes that Cody just went and got from the security hut. It was pretty rogue. And he's taken us all access everywhere in the backstage of Johnson Space Center. It even said astronauts only on some of these doors, and we're like walking through them. It's crazy. And yeah, so we built this really strong relationship with Cody. And then he put us in contact with SpaceX because he said they've got a mission going up in about 3 months, and I want to put you forward to go on the mission as one of their research projects. And that's how we got into space for the first time, because of Cody making that connection. We impressed the guys at SpaceX, and they put us on the mission. They tested the product first in a vacuum and in a freezer and like validated it for space, and then we went up on that mission. Subsequently, we've been on another one. So I went to watch it launch from Cape Canaveral. So that was a Fram 2. That was like 6-8 weeks ago, which was a surreal moment. I felt the air around me vibrating as the rocket was launching. And I was just looking at it thinking, the products that I was sewing in my spare room 8 years ago are on that rocket right now. Well, the current version. And that was a big pinch me moment because it was really real. And since then, we've got 3 more space missions that are planned, including, touch wood, will be on the Artemis mission. So the mission going to the moon and the mission going to Mars, which like humankind first, that we'll be a part of. So for a chippy startup from the UK, it's not bad. It's not bad.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Major congratulations to all of you guys for doing what you're doing. And it is very exciting. I love hearing stories of people that are doing stuff. I know how hard it is doing anything, and especially on such a big stage with big brands, and it's all exciting. However, I know you've obviously got all the other stuff behind it trying to make that work. So like just for you, because you've come up with this and then you're working with these guys that you know a little bit, Raj and Paul, but then how do you work that dynamic where I guess you're the scientist behind it, it's your product. How do you work together as a trio?
It's very much our business, and Raj works harder than anyone I've ever met to make this work. And kudos to that guy. This doesn't happen without him. But equally, it didn't happen without my idea, and I guess everything that came before as well. So together, we've been a really great duo. Paul's a retired, heavy hitting M&A lawyer. He's a equity partner in Gibson Dunn, a top 10 law firm in the world. He set up the practice in London, set the practice up in Dubai. So he's a big deal. So he's not full time in Hytro. He is the chairman. He's one of the founders. We use him for advice. He's an incredible wealth of knowledge and experience that we tap into all of the time, and he's amazing for that. And he does some of our legal work. But Raj and I are the two people running the ship, essentially. Raj is running the ship, and I'm the founder with Raj on that journey. And it's all, to be honest, based very much on respect. Like, I respect everything that these guys have achieved and what they've done for Hytro, and I think vice versa, because we will have moments where we disagree, but it's very respectfully. And I think you see a lot of startups fail because the founders don't get on. Irrespective of what we disagree on, we're incredibly respectful and understand each other's expertise. And that's super, super important, because we can move past anything. We can literally, any problem that we've come up against, we can move past because we trust one another. Even like earlier in the journey investment, Raj could ring me and say, we need to find 6 figures in a short amount of time to make sure this company survives. This is years ago, and cool, let's get to work. And guess what? We pulled 6 figures in a few days because of our networks and angels and professional athletes, because we work together. So I think, yeah, based on respect, mate, and yeah, it's working so far anyway.
Yeah, no, I love Raj. Raj is great. Like, he's very humble, very down to earth. I know he's got that senior background, but he just comes across as a really genuine guy. So I've only met him a few times, but just one of those. He's very likable. Whereas you can sometimes hear about people that have worked in other areas that may not be. But he's he's got charisma, hasn't he? He's got a good vibe about himself. Got a very warm personality
Certainly
on
does.
things. And it's one of the things that I always find interesting, and like we're in the business that we sell medical devices and education and those sort of things. But the word of sales within medicine, healthcare, rehab, all of those things, it's even people that are good friends of mine that are very experienced that are selling things, they still sort of like. So, what's your experience of for one selling the product and having come from that clinical world? Like, how do you deal with that world of word of sales?
So what I do is I don't consider anything I do sales, although of course I guess you could term it as soft sales. I'm legitimately talking passionately about something that I believe in. So when I hypothesize that by adding BFR to an ice bath at the same time, which no one's ever done, and I explain the hypotheses, I explain the science, I reference and cite papers and explain why it's exciting, and then show them that we're doing the research to back it up, that's selling the product because they're like, this company are doing everything right to innovate, and I want to back that. The product's really good, but at the end of the day, you back the horse that's doing that kind of stuff. So I'm never selling in inverted commas. I'm actually speaking peer to peer. And I want to underline that because that's super important for me. Sales scares me. I would never be a salesperson on paper, but actually, I guess I'm probably the biggest salesperson in Hytro because every day I'm driving new messaging, innovations, insights, hypotheses, research that we're driving forward at Hytro. That is sales, I guess, in essence, right? But yeah, I mean, I think I've answered the question there from my perspective. If
Yeah,
that's yeah,
I think that's what it is. I think you're a good example of it. As in, I think people do just think I'm not a salesperson, whereas what you're doing, what clinicians are doing, is you're communicating with someone, and I love the word that you said there, like that belief, like conviction. From my side, when you're saying something, you've got to have conviction and belief in that what you're doing is genuinely you think this is the best solution for them. And if you've not got that, then you've got no chance really of anything. And you obviously don't want to be doing that with anything because then you are that stereotypical sleazy salesperson, all those words that come out with it. Whereas you've got complete belief and knowledge and you understand why that product works. So yeah, it's
also
an interesting one.
also just being honest as well. Like there's times when people ask why will BFR work in this setting? If I don't know the answer, I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm going to state, first of all, I might try do a workshop with them at the time and say, let's pull on some science threads here and understand mechanistically, could that work? And if it doesn't work, fine. Like, let's not pull on that thread anymore. Let's put it to bed. If we do research and we find Hytro doesn't work in X, Y, and Z settings, that's brilliant because what it does is forward the industry. We don't want to show everything works. We want to show the reality of where BFR fits and how it fits your workflow. So you probably see my posts in recent days or weeks. I'm being a bit more putting the neck out on the line, to be honest, and I really want to stimulate discussion because the amount of medical clinicians that come to us and say, I have to use a specific percent limb occlusion pressure and a specific protocol, and that's it. I'm like, I'm asking why. Like at the end of the day, why can't we be flexible if we know that BFR works safely and effectively in these pressure ranges, and it definitely works in any of these protocols because there's thousands of research papers. Why does it need to be this one? Why can't we flex it to your workflow or the needs of that individual? They only have 10 minutes. Cool, we can't do this protocol then because it doesn't fit. Let's flex the protocol to fit your needs. And I'm very happy to do that, even with the science hat on, and say, we don't know what optimal is, but we know what works and we know what's safe and effective. Let's do that because that's the practical side of it. Let's bridge science and practice. And that's where I really want to position myself. I don't just want to be that surgical, rigid clinician researcher that says you have to do X, or just a practitioner that's really willy-nilly. I want to say, here's the evidence, here's the guardrails, and let's work within this and flex it to your needs. And it's as simple as that for me. There's no specifics or numbers that are needed. Let's just make it fit. I don't know how you feel about that as a practitioner.
No, I know. I definitely think I like that, and that's that. I think going back to your initial point in that last bit there, it's being happy to be challenged yourself, and being challenging to other people. It shouldn't just be that, oh, okay, yeah, no, we can do that. It's got to be a conversation. And that is, as you said earlier on about advancing the industry, you have got to push the boundaries a little bit, but as long as you're being safe alongside it. So I think it's a conversation, whatever, any bit of sales. I mean, again, someone said to me initially, you're never a salesman. And now, I've been running a sales company for however long, and I don't really consider myself a salesperson still. It's just you having conversations and trying to understand more than anything. Like that's a big thing. And you mentioned about asking questions, that curiosity piece, conviction, they're like massive things. And then basically being consistent. They're the three big things, like three C's that I think are so key for this is you have got to ask what are people trying to achieve? You've got to believe in what it can do and also say if it can't do what they want. And then just do what you say you're going to do, deliver it. I think it's really simple on for each of those areas of whether you call that sales or service or whatever it is.
Yep, no, mate, 100% agree. I think we're totally aligned on that. Yeah, I think playing in that grey area is where I fit best because you can, as long as you can underpin everything you say with some science, all we care about is driving practice, best practice. Like I remember actually, here's a good example. When I was working in football, there was a particular athlete who couldn't eat anything or drink a recovery shake after a game. But with my PhD in physiology and nutrition, I knew that there was a 90-minute opportunity for optimizing glycogen resynthesis. You can still obviously resynthesize glycogen after, but it's optimized if you hit some carbs in that window. And he loved peanut butter jam sandwiches. I was like, fantastic. It's not the optimal macro kind of profile, but you know what? We're going to get 60 grams of carbs in this guy. We're going to get 30 grams of protein, and he's definitely going to benefit from it. Let's meet him where he is and give him what he wants. Whereas I've seen other practitioners say, no, you must have this recovery shake because we've ticked it off our list. It's exactly the macros you need. It's just nonsense. Like you need to meet them where they're at. And that's exactly what we're doing with Hytro. We're meeting coaches, athletes, any stakeholder that has anything to do with the product. We're meeting them where they're at. Like even kit men, we're making sure it's easy for them to wash, hang out, and put out on a peg because it's got like squad numbers on. Just servicing everyone that's going to have hands on your product and use your product as best as you possibly can, instead of saying BFR or anything has to be applied exactly like this, because it's just not true. It just simply isn't true. And people have got held up on that for many years, I think.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and that's why you're doing well with what you are, which is great. So I mean, from my side, like it's amazingly impressive. I love watching you do it. Inspires me to see all the work that you guys are doing. So it's well done with that. And like, where do you see it going? And what's the next few years?
There's a lot to go, my friends. So professional sports, we've barely scratched the surface. 300 pro teams and colleges. I mean, there must be dozens of thousands, right? So more penetration in pro and college sports. At the same time, we're looking at consumer. So we're looking at the D2C, um, anything from grassroots, semi-pro down to grassroots, anyone who wants a bit more from their performance. And really what excites me the most about the future is the longevity piece and the health and wellness, because BFR can definitively help reduce sarcopenia, reduce osteoporosis, improve life quality of millions and millions of people. And for me, that's got to be the future of what we do, because we've democratized people's ability to access this. Like withholding that from society is a crime. I think it's actually a massive, massive opportunity. So pro sports, consumers, and moving into the kind of longevity, health and wellness spaces, I think.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really exciting times. What would your advice be to people, just I suppose anyone in the industry starting a business, any sort of general advice that you would give people?
Lock yourself in a room and turn off the radio. No, I'm joking. I think it's finding the right people to work to have around you to help formulate your idea, help deliver your idea. You might be an amazing solo founder. You might be incredible at that. For me, that wasn't the case. And I think plugging the gaps of your expertise is super important. I needed business acumen. I found Raj and Paul. So I think building that founder, like duo, trio, whatever it might be, is incredibly important. From my perspective, of course, there are individuals like yourself that can go solo because you're incredible. But that for me, that would be That would be the biggest piece of advice. Surround yourself with great people.
Yeah, well, no, interestingly, so I'm starting another business with two physio friends of mine, which is all around peer-to-peer support. And mine was, look, I don't want to do this one on my own. Like, just not
Yeah.
only because it's hard and like there's pros and cons to everything, isn't there? Because then you have got to run things by. But yeah, I actually think it would have been really helpful for me to have someone that's doing it. But you deal with what you've got at the time, and maybe you wouldn't be doing it if you had done it. So you never know, do you? You're just trying to make the best decisions at the time that
Yeah.
you make them, and hope for the best, really. And so, like you say, surround yourself with good people, whether they're in the company, founders, or whatever. You still need great people around you that believe in what you're doing.
It sounds cliche, doesn't it? Like it sounds surround yourself with good people, but at the end of the day, like the pie's big enough if you're willing to share it, and you'll go faster, you'll grow it bigger if you get the right expertise in house. You can't be an expert at everything. It's obviously impossible. So I understood where my limitations were, and there was a lot of them. And we think and hope we've plugged each other's gaps in the business, and where we actually have gaps, we're filling that with great C-suite people as well. So yeah, that'll
Yeah.
be my take home.
Brilliant. No, great. Look, thank you for your time on that. Hopefully we'll get to catch up soon when you're in the country, and yeah,
Sure.
get that sleep in before you've got the impending arrival.
Thank you, buddy. If anyone wants to learn more or understand a bit more about BFR or Hytro, you can have a head to the website, hytro.com, or go to my own socials on LinkedIn. That's just Warren Bradley. Um, Follow the journey. It's quite interesting when you want to see rockets taking off and dinners with NFL people. It's pretty cool. So give it a look.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I'll put your info in the bio after this as well. But yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andy. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers, mate.